So let me work you through probably the key preparatory steps before you even entertain this discussion, and then we get into a skills practice. So we're in the Lumient platform here. The first thing I'm going to do is just double check out of my clients, Dan and Abby, who is the CFO and the non-CFO. So for those of you that have done a values conversation before, you know we always like engaging the non-CFO first because they rarely get engaged in a conversation around their finances. Same goes for unpacking the Your Life questionnaire. So I know that Abby is the non-CFO here and Dan is the CFO. So I'll make a mental note of that and then get straight back into their life to get a bit more preparation done. Now, what you're looking at the screen here is a client that has done a couple Your Life surveys. So they've probably started their relationship with us 12 months ago. This is their second one. For the sake of the role play today, let's pretend they haven't had a relationship with us before, or this is their first time doing the Your Life survey. So we'll just take Dan and Abby's score at 63 and 69. At this point, I'm just noting the score on my notes. So I'm going, all right, so Dan's a little bit lower than Abby. Whether they're 100%, 30%, whatever that might be, it's their score. Everyone ranks themselves a little bit differently. I wouldn't get too caught up in that score today, in particular with their conversation, because everyone can be their own harshest critic. All you need to do is clock it and be able to sort of unpack it with them. The next thing I want to go through is actually a comparison between these two charts. So what I'm looking for here is, what did Dan and Abby say was most important to them? And then if I offset that around how they're tracking to what's most important to them. And this is really important because I'm sure a few of you on the webinar today are going 8 dimensions of well-being, plus a values conversation, plus a goals conversation, plus any fact finding I need to do, might turn into a bit of a monster of a meeting. And you're absolutely correct if you go through all of those. To reiterate, this is a preparatory discussion. The main game is that values and goals discussion. So all I want to do is pick out a couple conversation starters so that it can start to whet the appetite of our client conversation in our meeting to get them thinking that this isn't the normal advice experience here. We want to get to know them. So if I have a look at Abby first as the non-CFO, what sticks out to me are the dimensions that most important to her are social, occupational, and emotional. And if I offset that around how she's tracking, emotional is probably the most important and least progressed. So I really want to unpack that. Okay, so I've made a note of that, and that's probably where I'm going to start with Abby. Depending on time and how she's reacting, I might go into financial. So the reason I'm going financial second is it wasn't as important as emotional, as you can see, and she is the same amount as progressed. So I'm thinking emotional is the right thing. And the little red herring here is spiritual. You might go, well, that's only 55% as well, but she didn't rank it as highly as the others either. So that's why I'm sort of ranking it in that way. So I like to pick maybe 1 or 2 to go through depending on how much, because really this is just priming the discussion for the value session. For Dan, if we have a look at him, occupational is the most important out of all of his areas of well-being. And luckily, for the sake of the role play, it's also 55% achieved for him. So that'd be really interesting to unpack, in particular, given he's the CFO. So I assume there's something underneath there. So I've made notes of those. That's where I'm going to start with the conversation. The other thing I wanted to check is we ask in that Your Life survey, as Elise said, if there's anything specific on their mind that they want our help addressing. So obviously you want to clock this and have a look at this before the meeting. This is the boulder that they're carrying in. I've heard it sort of talked about before. So for the sake of the role play, we won't go into this section because we want to more unpack the rest of the survey. However, what I would recommend and what we recommend is you always start here. Always start with that burning issue first, because if they've said to you, this is the specific thing that's on my mind, you obviously want to uncover that. Uncover it as much as you think you need to at this early stage of the conversation, and then park it for the rest as you go through your well-being and values discussion. Because we know that whilst that's the initial scope of advice or area of advice, or however you want to call it, initial reason for reaching out, it's it could be exacerbated or could be further articulated by going through this process. The last thing you'll check is obviously if you want to go into those areas of wellbeing that we're going to talk about, which we will live. So Dan and Abby, I know I want to talk about emotional with Abby, so we'll get those ready to go. And I want to check the household details. Once again, probably not going to come up in this conversation right now, but we know that knowing these little financial details could be helpful if the conversation starts going towards money as you go through. And if they've gone to the trouble of picking it out and writing it down for you, if and when that comes up, you want to be able to know that you've looked at it. So that's the prep work I've done. I know I'm going into this conversation with Dan and Abby, what I'm going to unpack,